anybody who doesn't know Jeremy Corbyn, who is Jeremy Corbyn?
Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the Labour Party, which is Her Majesty's opposition in the country of my birth, Great Britain. Yeah, and he is the most left-wing leader of that party, certainly in my adult lifetime. Yeah, he has affiliations with Marxists and Marxism that are more than just affiliations. He's obviously, I think it's fair to say, a kind of a Marxist sympathizer. He has to his opponents, he has a checkered past with respect to the friends that he has made. He has supported, or he's been, again, openly sympathetic towards certain terrorist organisations, much less sympathetic to British institutions. For example, there was a bit of a to-do when he either issues with accepting invitations that are to do with the monarchy, right? So events involving the Queen, dressing appropriately for events involving the Queen. People find his overt disrespect for the beloved institutions of the country, problematic, some do. And the reason he's even worth talking about right now is not only the fact that he's the leader of the opposition, but Theresa May, the supposed Prime Minister of the UK, has decided to negotiate a version of Brexit, which is non-Brexit, with the Labour Party that want to water it down. Although they stood on a manifesto of honouring the Brexit result, they now, overwhelmingly, a majority of their MPs don't want to do so. Jeremy Corbyn is leading a party, therefore, of Remainers, despite the vote for Brexit. So and now Theresa May is sitting down with him to negotiate how we're going to leave. Now, this is not a good situation, people like me would say, and indeed most of her party would say, and indeed the majority of Britons that actually voted for Brexit would say. So it's all kinds of terrible shenanigans in which he's involved. The interesting thing about Corbyn, though, even more interesting thing, is that he has spent his whole life as an anti-EU left-winger. So his whole life he's been arguing for Brexit, right? But when it actually came to the vote, he and his party argued to remain. So even though he's one of these very kind of apparently authentic left-wingers, who's, as some people say, made a career of never changing his mind, on Brexit he's done a complete 180. So people don't quite trust him on this. And this, of course, is the biggest issue for the UK right now. So it's interesting. He's an interesting character.
What would you say have been some of the censorships and attacks on freedom of speech when it comes to England?
Oh, now, we've actually got anti-freedom of speech laws. We have hate laws that literally target speech. So people are getting called, the police are getting called literally for Twitter posts that other people find offensive. I mean, how that's happened in the United Kingdom, I don't know. I know the UK isn't the US, but it's just gone off the deep end on this nonsense. It's terrifying. I mean, it's really terrible. But yeah, there's a big problem with free speech in England right now. Big problem. And we had the whole thing about I think it was Lauren Southern that wasn't allowed into the country because she was deemed dangerous. At the same time, we have these overtly inciting of violence imams who are allowed to preach their hate on the streets of London and the rest of the country. The police will protect, let's say, I don't want to say Muslims, it's just too easy, but that is kind of an identifying characteristic, that actually degrade, and in some cases I believe even spit on, returning troops, British troops. The police will protect those protesters and their freedom of speech, but then we're not letting people like Lauren Southern into the country because she's dangerous, and we're getting... it was actually one recently, somebody got called, the police got called on somebody for what was allegedly a transphobic Twitter post. It clearly wasn't, but the claim was made, so the police had to investigate. And this in a country where police numbers have been cut to the point of causing difficulties on the streets. Then you could talk about knife crime in London, etc., etc. There's all kinds of trouble in Britain, as far as I can tell. Right now.
And right now you live in Seattle.
I do, yeah.
What's the climate there? I mean, you have the I take it you have the Antifa types out there in Seattle.
We do. I mean, we have those types. My district, half of which is downtown Seattle, is 90% Democratic. So it's one of the most democratic districts in the country. They have a hold on it. UW, University of Washington, is in a suburb called U Village, which is very close to downtown. And there are issues there of free speech, definitely. So yeah, no, we've got the left-wing problem. I mean, we've got an avowed, a self-identified socialist, right? Sawant, I think her name is, on the Seattle City Council, and we're paying about $16,500 per homeless individual welfare. Money to deal with their situation. $16,500 a year, which would be enough to put each one of them in a beautiful studio apartment in Seattle, and here's we're the government, we're here to help. So there's serious problems in politics in Seattle. I mean, it is a poster child for some of what's wrong with us versus them politics, ideologically driven politics. I mean, we had all the money come into the city of Seattle from outside, from around the nation, from around the United States, to make it not quite ground zero, but almost ground zero for the $15 minimum wage campaign, which has been passed in Seattle. We're gradually moving towards that. When I say gradually, I don't mean slowly, but I just mean incrementally, which has had impacts in SeaTac, where it was first used. We've also got, this isn't Seattle, but this is one of the nearby towns. We've got the soda tax. We've now got a sin tax on sodas because allegedly to help protect people from their own choices when it comes to their health vis-a-vis obesity. Interestingly, there's no triple latte tax that's hitting the drinkers of coffee in Starbucks, even though they match calorie for calorie. So what does that look like? Think of the person buying soda in Walmart, and then think of the person buying a latte in Starbucks, and I think you've got your answer. So God, I can go on. I am going on. Should probably stop.
Well, last question. You talked earlier about in post 9/11 world in America, we saw the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act. After the attack of 7/7, what were some of the encroachments of civil liberties in England?
Do you know, that's a good question, and I'm not aware that represented a step change in attacks on civil liberties in the UK. I mean, the UK was already, London was already the city in the world with the most number of surveillance cameras per head, for example. You've got to remember, London has a unique history related to the unique history of Britain vis-a-vis Ireland, right? So you had a terrorist organisation, the IRA and then the real IRA, murdering children in shopping malls all over the mainland. Mostly in Northern Ireland, but once it moved to the mainland, but it did move to the mainland. So security systems were put in place, like those kind of bollards that rise up from the ground to cut off parts of the city. Obviously the security cameras and all of that. They were in place before 7/7 for another reason. So I don't think, 7/7, because of that history, 7/7 didn't represent a step change in the experience of Britons that 9/11 represented in the US, because Brits have been used to terrorism, homegrown terrorism at home. That's been, I'm a Gen Xer, let's just say that, and I remember watching the news. Every week there would be something to do with the IRA, something to do with an attack, often on civilians. We were often dealing with that. I mean, every week, I might be overstating it, but you get the idea. It was always there. It was always there. Just like, for an American or a Russian, the Cold War was always there. You were the front line of that, right? I mean, we obviously were too in Europe, but you know what I mean? It was that kind of a background. So 7/7, it's like, one of the best responses to 7/7 I saw on the internet, this is in my book, by the way, And it was just a meme. It was before memes were cool, but it really was a meme. You call it a meme now. It was a picture of a cup of tea, and it just had the words, "We drink tea in your general direction." Now, that's a reference, I think, to a Monty Python skit, right? Which is obviously part of British culture, but it's also, if I can decode it, Brits drink tea. We're saying to the terrorists, this was the response after 7/7, we're saying to the terrorists, you're not even going to make us stop drinking our tea. You're not even going to make us put it down. You might merely make us turn slightly to see what you're up to, so we're drinking it in your general, not specific, but general direction. It's a classic British reaction. It was very understated, and I'm now a proud American, but certainly on that day, it was one of my proudest days. The week that followed it, I was so proud of being British, because the British reaction was right in all the ways that the American reaction wasn't.